Hey there, Evan Hirsch here, the Energy MD, and welcome back to the Energy MD podcast, where we help you resolve your chronic fatigue, whether it's from chronic fatigue syndrome or long COVID, so that you can get back to living your best life. So today we're going to be talking about the two laboratory tests that you have to get in order to resolve your chronic fatigue, whether it's from ME/CFS or long COVID. So if you've been listening to me, you know that I talk a lot about the toxic five. So this is a combination of the heavy metals, chemicals, molds, infections, and nervous system dysfunction that all people have who have chronic fatigue, whether it's from ME/CFS or long COVID. And I don't even test for these anymore. I just treat them because I've seen over the last decade that everybody who has these conditions have them and they need to be removed out of the body. So you might be wondering, okay, well, what are these tests that are so important that we have to get? So we have to know if you're living in mold. That's the first test. So we want to get an EMA test, which is an environmental mycotoxin and moldiness assay, which is looking at mold spores and mycotoxins in your home. So you can also test your office or you can test your car, but we're really looking to see whether or not there's mold in the home. This is not, you're not going to test, you use a test for every single room in the house. You do one test to determine, and you do one test and you do samples in different parts of the house in order to determine whether or not there's mold present in the space. And then from there, we can move on to figure out exactly where it is and then potentially do remediation, whether it's do it yourself or whether it's got to bring somebody in to do it. So that's the first one. I have found that I cannot get somebody better if they're living in mold. So that's why that test is so important, so we can get that information. And I know that it sounds overwhelming to think about, oh gosh, I wonder if I have mold in my home and I really don't want to get that test because then what am I going to do about it? But you have to realize that we are in your back pocket, we're here for you, and we are going to help you navigate that. And so you just have to take the next step. Like so many things in life, you just have to keep moving forward and eventually you'll get there. The only people who don't get there are those who quit, no matter what you're doing, whether it's building a business or whether it's trying to achieve a health goal. Okay, so that's the first one. The second one is a cone beam CT or a CAT scan, which is going to look at the jaw to look for what are called dental cavitations or hidden infections. This is something that I learned the hard way because I was addressing all of the toxic five, and yet there were still some people who I couldn't get better. Well, when I learned about the potential for hidden infections in the jaw, and then I said, okay, let's go ahead and check that. After we've done everything, we're about a year into a protocol and the person has gotten some improvement, but not all the way better. Then I'm like, okay, well, what are we missing? Let's try this. I've always thought that like the dental stuff is kind of like extraneous. We don't really have to deal with it initially. And there were a number of people who we found that they had dental cavitations, they had them fixed. And voila, all of a sudden they feel so much better. And then it's in combination with all the other work that we did. So this is one of those that I also recommend that you get sooner rather than later. And you do need to get this from a biologic dentist. And the organization that I recommend that you look at to find a biologic dentist is IAOMT.org, the International Association of Oral and Maxillary Toxicology. .org. And I'll drop that link below along with the link to the EMA test. But you have to go find a biologic dentist. And if you don't see anybody on that website at IAOMT.org, then search for biologic dentists near me. And there's a couple of criteria that you're looking for. You're looking for somebody who can order the cone beam CT. Hopefully they potentially have it in their office as something that you can do. You're looking for a biologic dentist who uses ozone, who has a fragrance-free office, potentially, who does not use mercury fillings or mercury amalgams, and who's using more of like a composite, and who is naturally going to be more holistic by doing these different things. So that's what I recommend that you look for. And when you call them up, you're asking these questions to see what are their policies and if they order cone beam CTs. Oh, and you also don't want a biologic dentist. You don't want a dentist who's going to recommend root canals, because the way that you get these dental cavitations in the jaw and infections is from pulling a tooth, where wisdom teeth extraction is one of the most common ways, or it's from creating an artificial canal that comes from a root canal. So those would definitely be better to be pulled, in my experience and in this situation. Because basically what ends up happening is that you can get an infection from the space that is created, and then that infection just kind of leaches into the rest of the circulation. And so then you have chronic inflammation that's happening in the body. Okay, so that's the two tests. We need to get an EMA test to determine, are you living in mold? And if you are, we need to do something about it. And number two is we need to see whether or not you have infections in the jaw. Okay. Besides that, as part of the Toxic 5, we are going to address the heavy metals, the chemicals, the molds, the infections, and the nervous system dysfunction. So you may be thinking, well, if you're going to address the molds anyway, why do I need to test? And the thing is that you may have had mold exposure from when you were 5 years old, when you lived in a home that the basement flooded every year, and it's still in your body. So there is a difference between the mold that you're exposed to right now and the mold that is in your body. So getting rid of mold out of the body is really a two-step process. We have to make sure that you're no longer being exposed to it, and then we have to bind it up and pull it out. Okay? And so we want to make sure that we're going to be addressing the Toxic 5. And I have a 4-step process in which we do this. Now, the 4th step is actually the Toxic 5. The first step is to determine the causes that you have. And if you have ME/CFS, chronic fatigue syndrome, and or long COVID, then I know that we're going to be addressing the Toxic 5. I also know that we're going to be addressing adrenal gland dysfunction and mitochondrial dysfunction, because you can't have ME/CFS or long COVID without those. And so those are all the ones we're going to address. But then we also need to personalize it to you, which includes seeing whether or not you have a thyroid issue, whether or not you have a sleeping issue, what your lifestyle habits are. So that's kind of how we fine-tune things initially, by personalizing a plan for you. And then in step 2, we're replacing the deficiency, the adrenals, the mitochondria, and the thyroid, what I call the big 3. Any vitamins and minerals that are deficient, optimizing lifestyle habits, all of this is going to increase the energy just a little bit for about half the people we work with. And so this happens around month 2 or month 3, where your energy will go for, let's say, a 4 out of 10, if 10's ideal energy, up to a 5 out of 10. Sometimes you'll notice that you need less caffeine, you're having less crashes. Things really work well when we kind of optimize some of those deficiencies. It makes you more resilient as well, and it does improve detoxification, so that when we move on to step 3, where we're opening up the different pathways, the liver, the kidney, the lymph, the neural lymph that's in the brain, the gallbladder, the intestines, all those pathways are open, so that when we go into step 4 and we start to remove the Toxic 5, we're going to have a lot more success. So we're kind of opening the door in order to be able to get those toxins out, because if we can't get them out, they get recirculated right back into the body. So if you find that you're working with a practitioner who's not addressing the Toxic 5, and you've been with them for 6 months or longer, and you're not getting the results that you want, it's probably because you're missing something. And unfortunately, our lab tests are all imperfect. So when we're looking at urine tests to determine whether you've got heavy metals or chemicals or molds or even infections, the urine test really is a test of excretion. So it's telling us how well you're excreting. It's not telling us your total body burden. So we really need to figure out, we really need to go ahead and treat those Toxic 5, because those laboratory tests are inconsistent and imperfect. And so treating the Toxic 5 is really important. And then we have to get these other tests that I talked about today, the EMA test to make sure you're not living in mold, and then the cone beam CT by a biologic dentist to make sure you don't have any hidden infections in your jaw. So I hope that's helpful for you today. If you are interested in what we have to offer, and interested in learning more about my philosophy and going into depth on the 4-step process, you can go ahead and click on the link below, jump into our latest masterclass. If it resonates with you, you can then get on a free call with me to see if we're a good fit to work together. And on this call, I'll start off by asking you a bunch of questions to see if I can help you. And some of this is based on really what you have been doing and what you haven't been doing. I'm looking for what's missing. And then if I feel like I can help you, I will let you know. If I feel like I can't, I will let you know that as well. If you do want to move on to learning about the program structure and the investment, we can then do that at that time. All right. I hope that's helpful, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. I hope you learned something on today's podcast. If you did, please share it with your friends and family and leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. It's really helpful for getting this information out to more people who desperately need it. Sharing all the experts I know and love and the powerful tips I have is one of my absolute favorite things to do. Thanks for being part of my community. Just a reminder, this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional care by a doctor or other qualified medical professional. It is provided with the understanding that it does not constitute medical or other professional advice or services. Thanks for listening, and have an amazing day.